So the theme of this show is bad ideas. It's going to be bad ideas and how, as I just mentioned, they cannot perpetuate themselves over time because people can smell BS a mile away, which leads to one of my favorite things, which is the self-help industry and how much that I hate it. So this channel is really meant to describe a new way of value-driven personal development, of getting personal development done from a sense of values or people that are driven by values rather than people who are driven by other things that are not values. They're not aligned with the way that people see the world and how people go through it in a sense that is going to be helpful to other people and not just really self-serving in all of those ways too. So it's good that we have a definition for this, or I want to propose a definition for this. So the definition that I have come up with for value-driven personal development is the art of making yourself better through a lens of personal values cultivated through deep and individualized reflection. So it is getting to know yourself enough. So by not being obsessed with yourself, by the way, that's a key word, to know what your values are, what is important to you. So therefore, you are not influenced and thrown by the wayside through every just willy-nilly element of culture that happens throughout the entire show. And I think where I want to really dive into this is that this is where I think the self-help industry goes way off the reservation. So self-help is wrong, and this is a bold claim to make, by the way, and I'll back this up. But self-help is wrong because it is designed from a system that is inverted from what value-driven personal development is. Self-help is wrong because it is designed from a system of other people's values to come in and influence yours. And value-driven personal development is better because this relationship is inverted. So there are generally two ways that you can watch, or that you can, I would say, come up with a value system. You can have it imported, or you can develop it and make it yourself and export your values outside of the world. It works a lot like an economy in that way, which is, by the way, why value economics is such a helpful analogy from all fronts, if I could say so myself. So think about it like this. The reason why a lot of economies die is because they don't make things. They have kind of a hollowed out economy and they are dependent on everybody else. So I think, for example, China right now is in some deep trouble because I think they import 80% of their food for the nation. And so if you look at China, I think actually India just passed them up in total population. But for a long time, China was the most populous country in the entire world. They had 1.3 and they still have 1.3 billion people right now. So that's a really big deal if they have 1.3 billion people inside of their country and they're dependent on 80% of their food to feed those 1.3 billion people coming into their country. So what I would do if I were China is I would invest in some kind of industrial manufacturing or farming or something to get them. I'm far from an expert on this, by the way, but you can't have 80% being swayed in your favor, because what happens if you have a foreign policy incident or something where your biggest manufacturer of grain, for example, just says, you know what, we're done with you. We're not going to trade anymore with you. We don't like the way that you do this. We don't like the way that you do that. So we're going to cut off your grain supply. Well, carbs are a big deal, if you don't know, especially to 1.3 billion people. And with China's system of government and their kind of system they have over there, they need to distribute that properly. And when that gets cut out at the knees, people are going to starve. People are going to start robbing people. Crime's going to go up. It's going to go really, really bad in a hurry. So the best economies are the ones that make things. This is kind of where our economy has really gone in very wide-ranging disarray, is because we don't really make many things. We have a lot of entrepreneurial talent. We had a lot of industry at one point, but since we outsourced and we kind of have financialized and commoditized our economy, it's really made us dependent on a lot of other people for the base foundational needs. And the same is true when it comes to a value system, because if you're just leeching off of other people to get your sense of importance, your sense of value from everybody else, then if people move out of your life, people adopt different things than you, you're either going to have to do one of two things. You're going to totally bend at the knees to totally make sure you're sticking with their values even though they're changing for you, or you are going to have to switch to somebody else, which is expensive, it's hard, it's taxing, you'll have to uproot big parts of your life. So what I think value-driven personal development really means is being self-sufficient when it comes to your values. And I think this is the reason, if you look at this from a general perspective, the reason why everything seems so similar and boring in the world right now in this realm is because it is. Like, everything seems so similar and boring because everything in our world, in our country, in our culture is similar and boring. We have crowded out, we have so leveled the sense of individuality in our country, because the people who have institutionalized control of the self-improvement space, which we'll get to in a second, are success mongers, as I call them. They have institutionalized and monopolized the market of the self-improvement space and made it nearly impossible for new voices to break through. So when self-help was becoming a thing, really probably in the mid-2000s, I would say, so probably like that mid-2005, that's when, well, I would say probably later 2000s, like 2009, that's when really a lot of social media companies started to come in. I think Facebook had the wall that really went crazy, and people started kind of to build audiences and build personal brands and things like that at that point. And so we have had these actors come in for a long time. Like Gary Vee's claim to fame, for example, was that he was an early investor in like every major social media platform, in Facebook, in Twitter at the time, before it was X, in I think, YouTube or Vimeo or something like that. He was an early stage investor in all of these. And that was really smart for Gary Vee, because when you're into something early and you establish a foothold early, you have more time to build an audience. You have more time to rehearse your message, more time to import or export your values that you have cultivated inside, which is what all of our self-help improvement people do. They cultivate a sense of values. You can say a lot of things about them, and I have a lot of negative things to say, but you cannot say that they are not value-driven, because they are. They are driven by values. They're not valueless people. It's just that they have a sense of values that I don't think has been good for a lot of people, because when you take that microcosm, that outlier of success, and try to import it on a broader population, you're going to get a lot of failure, a lot of disappointment, a lot of mental health issues, a lot of other things that a lot of people really don't have control of. And so also, when people are so dependent on, again, your 80% food imports, if you're China in this case, if you're getting 80% of your values from one person or a couple of people, and if one of those people leaves or if one of those people changes tune, you have a massive identity problem, because your identity is so tied down and so latched to all of these people that when they move, you are going to have to either one, move with them, or two, completely upend in your entire life to get some new values imported into your life so that you don't go nuts in terms of everything else. And so as this kind of monopolization has happened in the self-improvement market, we've really had no disruption in the space. Even with, the advent of new social media, the advent of, late-stage influencers coming in, podcasts have exploded since the time this initially started. There has been some disruption, but really the ideas are what I want to focus on here. Again, this is a podcast, and this is an episode that's dedicated to bad ideas and why bad ideas are allowed to take place. And so what this is allowed for, what this kind of success monger culture, this influencer culture of the mainstream self-help movement, what this is allowed for is harmful ideas to come in and capture the marketplace of ideas, not necessarily of people, but ideas. If you see a lot of the people that are in similar spaces, their ideas aren't that different. And I should give them maybe some grace here, because no ideas really are all that different in general anyways. But really, there's no differentiation between what Gary Vee says, what Grant Cardone says, what Alex Hormozy says, what this person says, whatever. And, like or hate those people. I have a generally pessimistic opinion on them anyways. But this has actually had an effect of, I think, doing some real damage, because it has imploded and cut out at the knees actual constructive debate surrounding the ideas of how to become a better person, surrounding the ideas of becoming a more actualized human being, and which ones are worth exploring further as we move on into the rest of the discussion we're going to have today, and we're going to have over and over and over again on the show. And I think that just because this is where diversity is a good thing. Diversity is a good thing if it's diversity of ideas, diversity of thought. And this is one space where there's a bunch of diversity inside of it. There's women influencers, there's male influencers, there's black influencers, white influencers, Asian influencers, whatever, all in the self-improvement space. But they're all leading the same masturbatory, the same tired, beaten ideas that have really just done nothing in terms of everything else. Because the ultimate sign of an effective product is if someone uses it and they eventually have to stop using it for the most part. So for example, this is my beef with therapy. So if therapy actually worked, which I don't think it does for most people, if therapy actually worked, why are people in therapy for 6 years? Therapy is supposedly it's a medical doctor administering a mental health treatment on a patient. So if you are going in and you break your arm doing something, and you go in to a doctor and they cast you up, and they say, we're going to have this thing on you for 3 months, and we're going to come back, we're going to cut it off, you have people sign it, whatever, and then your arm's going to be healed after a while. It would be a problem, and you should, have issue if 6 years later your arm is still broken and your arm is not better. And we've done the same thing with our minds, but basically we don't pick a fight with it because the mental health industrial complex is so obsessed with keeping a lifetime customer value of a patient that goes to them, again, for a medical mental health treatment. It is no different than an arm. It is no different than a leg being broken. And I know there's differences between how the brain works and how a leg works, yes, but it is the same general principle. If you're going for a medical treatment, if you're going in for a medical procedure, you better have a medical solution to that problem, or that thing is going to atrophy. That thing is going to get worse. Because if you leave a cast on your arm, I'm sure you guys have noticed this, if you guys have had any sort of injury in your life, particularly with a limb. So I knew, Chris Williamson, he tore his Achilles a couple years ago. And he said in a couple podcasts that when he took the cast or the boot off of his ankle and off of his foot, he was very, very diminished in terms of his calf muscle because the Achilles connects to the calf muscle and is the calf that he tore his Achilles versus the calf that was actually still walking around and getting use and getting exercise, etc. So that is, I think, what is happening generally with self-help. We have really had no contest of ideas when it comes to self-help ideas. They're all the same ones that have been beaten over and over and over again. And the people that have used those ideas, the people that want to aspire to be better people, the ones that want to be better husbands and fathers and wives and mothers and citizens and all these other people, or all these other things and elements, which are all good things, and it is a good thing to want to improve themselves. But if people are still buying the same books, they're still listening to the same podcasts, they're still not getting better in any form or fashion while doing these things, it's safe to say, I think, that those things don't work. And maybe, just maybe, the people that are running the self-help space do not want them to work. Maybe, just maybe. Because if people get better inside of the self-help, if people actually help themselves, then what's the point of selling more products? Your value goes to zero on the marketplace. And so I would just be aware of those things. I would be aware of the people that are out there saying that, hey, it's just going to be this. It's just like, I'm trying to help people, whatever. Maybe they are. And maybe they are. But I would argue that it's probably not as cut and dry as a lot of people think.